Vanessa Williams straightened her pristine white shirt as she walked through the glass doors of Hamilton and Brooks investment firm. At 32, with her Harvard MBA and years of experience, she believed her credentials would speak for themselves. What her colleagues didn't know, what she deliberately kept private, was that she was married to James Carter, the reclusive tech billionaire whose global business empire continued to expand with remarkable precision. Their marriage was her sanctuary, not her identity, and she was determined to succeed on her own merits. The first signs of trouble appeared within weeks. Assignments matching her expertise were redirected to others. Her input in meetings was acknowledged with nods, but no follow-up actions. Richard Hamilton, the 48-year-old CEO with perfectly coiffed silver hair, would place his hand on her shoulder a second too long after praising her surprising insight. The message was clear without being explicit. You're here because we need diversity numbers, not because we value your expertise. Melissa Parker, Vanessa's direct manager, was less subtle. Vanessa, sweetie, she'd say in front of the entire team, would you mind taking notes again? You're just so thorough, and we need someone to handle the administrative side. Then she'd exchange knowing glances with Sarah Thompson, her office ally, both of them suppressing smirks as Vanessa was relegated to secretary despite her senior analyst position. Tonight, Vanessa worked late again, meticulously putting the finishing touches on an analysis report that had been dropped on her desk at 4 p.m., demanded by morning. Her phone buzzed. James checking in. Another late night? His text read, concern evident. You don't have to do this, you know. But she did have to do it. Not for the money, but for herself, for others who would come after her, for the principle that excellence should speak for itself regardless of gender or color. As she gathered her things to leave, a notification popped up on her computer. An email accidentally included her in a chain between Richard and Melissa. Her heart sank as she read. Need to find a way to push her out before the Johnson meeting. Too risky to have her involved at this level. The Johnson meeting was in 3 days. A major potential client, a chance to shine, or it seemed, a carefully constructed opportunity to fail. Vanessa sat back in her chair, the office now completely silent. She had 3 choices: quit and give them what they wanted, confront them, and likely be gaslit about her paranoia, or prepare like never before and refuse to be pushed aside. With steady hands, she shut down her computer, smoothed her white shirt, and made her decision. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Morning light streamed through the windows as Vanessa selected her outfit for the day. Another white shirt, crisp, pristine armor against the world. James watched from the doorway, coffee mug in hand. You should let me help, he said quietly. One call, and I cooled. Vanessa turned to him with a firm expression that stopped his words. James, we've talked about this. I need to do this my way. If I run to my billionaire husband every time things get tough, what message does that send? I need to change the system from within. James approached, gently adjusting her collar. The system is broken, V. It's not designed for people like us to succeed through merit alone. He kissed her forehead. At least let me put a mic on you, just for safety. These people, the things they say to you, it should be documented. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. The small recording device, disguised as a button, was their compromise. She wouldn't use James' influence, but she wouldn't be defenseless either. At the office, Vanessa found her desk buried under files. Work meant to distract her from the Johnson presentation. Melissa walked by with a saccharine smile. Richard wants those analyzed by 3. Oh, and the Johnson presentation has been moved up. It's tomorrow morning now. She walked away before Vanessa could respond. Working through lunch, Vanessa discovered inconsistencies in the files, small discrepancies in valuation that collectively pointed to potential manipulation. As evening fell, she was still working, piecing together the presentation while unraveling the mysteries in the documents. The next morning, Vanessa arrived early, her presentation materials prepared despite the lack of sleep. But when she reached her desk, her heart sank. Her laptop was gone. The backup files on her USB drive had vanished from her locked drawer. Even her handwritten notes were missing. The Johnson presentation was in 2 hours, and everything had disappeared. As the realization washed over her, she noticed Melissa and Sarah arriving, exchanging glances and barely suppressed smiles. The conference room gleamed with polished wood and ambient lighting designed to impress clients. Michael Johnson, a distinguished 55-year-old CEO with deep laugh lines around his eyes, sat at the head of the table, his team of advisors flanking him. Richard led the procession, hand extended. "Michael, wonderful to see you again. We're extremely pleased to present our investment strategy today." His eyes flickered briefly toward Melissa, who nodded subtly. The plan was in motion. Vanessa would be called upon unprepared and unsupported, her failure public and undeniable. Vanessa entered the room last, her white shirt impeccable, her posture straight despite the tension between her shoulders. She had spent the last hour recreating what she could from memory. Richard's smile faltered slightly when he saw her composed expression. "Ah, Vanessa, there you are. We were beginning to worry. Unfortunately, we'll have to adjust our presentation slightly due to some technical difficulties." Michael Johnson, however, was watching this exchange with interest. "Actually," he said, interrupting smoothly, "I'd like to hear from Ms. Williams first. I understand she's been leading the analysis on our portfolio diversification options." Richard froze momentarily, his carefully orchestrated plan suddenly derailed. "I'm not sure that's," Richard began, but Johnson cut him off with a raised hand. "I insist. I've heard good things about her approach." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Vanessa. With calm confidence that belied her inner turmoil, she approached the front of the room. She had no slides to fall back on, no detailed reports to reference. She had only her knowledge, her memory, and her truth. "Mr. Johnson," she began, her voice steady, "while I had prepared extensive visual analytics for today's presentation, I'm afraid they've been unexpectedly misplaced. However, I believe that sometimes numbers alone don't tell the complete story of an investment strategy. So instead, let me speak to the core principles guiding our recommendation for your portfolio." And with that, Vanessa launched into one of the most remarkable presentations anyone in the room had ever witnessed. Without notes or visual aids, she articulated a comprehensive investment strategy tailored specifically to Johnson's global interests, citing market trends, competitive analyses, and risk assessments from memory. By the time she concluded, the energy in the room had shifted palpably. Johnson was smiling, his advisors engaged in hushed discussions that carried the unmistakable tone of positive assessment. "Miss Williams," Johnson said finally, "that was remarkably insightful. I'd like to see those analytics when they're recovered, but I must say, any professional who can articulate such a comprehensive strategy without visual crutches clearly understands the material on a fundamental level." He turned to Richard, whose fixed smile had grown increasingly strained. "You've got an exceptional talent here, Hamilton. I look forward to working closely with her on this partnership." The following day, the office buzzed with energy as news of the Johnson contract spread. Richard had called an all-hands meeting, unusual for a Friday morning. Richard stood at the head of the table, vibrating with self-satisfaction. "Good morning, everyone. I've just gotten off the phone with Michael Johnson, and I'm thrilled to announce that he has signed the contract, the full portfolio, not just the North American assets." A wave of excitement rippled through the room. The Johnson account was even bigger than anticipated. "This is a testament to our exceptional team leadership." His eyes drifted to Melissa, who straightened in her chair. "Melissa's presentation and relationship management with the Johnson team has secured us a partnership that will define our firm's trajectory for years to come." Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. It was one thing to be denied credit in a staff meeting. It was another to have her work completely appropriated in front of the entire company. Richard continued, "I'd like to invite Melissa to say a few words about the strategy that won over the Johnson team." Melissa rose gracefully, taking her place at the front. "Thank you, Richard. It was certainly a challenge to develop an approach that would differentiate us from the competition." She proceeded to outline, point by point, the exact strategy Vanessa had presented from memory, claiming each insight as her own. As Melissa concluded to enthusiastic applause, Richard returned to the front. "I want to acknowledge everyone's contributions." He gestured to Sarah. Sarah's financial modeling formed the backbone of our proposal. He continued acknowledging various team members for peripheral contributions. Finally, his gaze landed on Vanessa. A hush fell over the room. "And of course, Vanessa, whoa." He paused as if searching for something meaningful. "Who provided administrative support during the final stages?" The dismissal was deliberate, designed to diminish. A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged among those who knew better, but no one spoke up. "Perhaps," Richard continued with a cold smile, "Vanessa would like to stand and say a few words about what she learned from observing Melissa's leadership during this process." It wasn't a request. It was a public humiliation disguised as professional development. Vanessa felt 30 pairs of eyes turn toward her. Slowly, she rose to her feet, aware that this moment would define her future at Hamilton and Brooks. She opened her mouth to speak when Melissa, making a sweeping gesture to emphasize a point, knocked her glass of Coca-Cola on the conference table. The cold soda splashed across Vanessa's pristine white shirt, soaking through immediately, the brown stains spreading across the fabric. Gasps filled the room, followed by stunned silence. Then, from somewhere near Melissa, a snicker broke out. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, ostensibly to cover her shock, but her eyes crinkled with poorly concealed amusement. "Oh my goodness," Melissa exclaimed, voice dripping with artificial concern. "How terribly clumsy of me." She made a show of grabbing napkins, dabbing ineffectively at the spreading stain, while actually making it worse. Vanessa stood perfectly still, feeling the cold liquid seeping through to her skin. Her face remained composed, though her eyes burned with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of pure determination. "Perhaps you should clean up in the restroom," Richard suggested, his emphasis making it clear Vanessa should remove herself from the meeting entirely. Without a word, Vanessa gathered her dignity around her like armor and walked steadily toward the door, feeling every stare on her back, hearing the whispers beginning as she left. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and texted James, "I can't do this anymore." His response came immediately, "I'm on my way." "Don't do anything, just wait." In the restroom, Vanessa tried futilely to clean the spreading stain. The door swung open, and Melissa entered, followed closely by Sarah, both still carrying the energy of victory. "You know," Melissa said conversationally, examining her reflection rather than looking at Vanessa directly, "in business, it's important to understand when you're outmatched. Some people just aren't cut out for this environment. There's no shame in recognizing your limitations." Sarah leaned against the sink, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "That stain's never coming out," she observed casually. "White is so unforgiving." Vanessa met Melissa's eyes in the mirror. "Is that what you tell yourself? That I'm outmatched? Is that why you had to steal my presentation, take credit for my strategy, pour soda on me like we're in middle school?" Melissa's expression hardened, the veneer of professionalism slipping. "Careful, Vanessa. Accusations like that can be career-ending, especially without proof." She turned away from the mirror, facing Vanessa directly now. "Besides, who would believe you? Your word against mine, against Richard's. Know your place." As Melissa and Sarah left, their laughter echoing behind them, Vanessa stood alone in the restroom. She looked at her reflection, the stained shirt, the composed face hiding a storm of emotions, and made a decision. Pulling out her phone, she sent another text to James, "It's time." Meanwhile, an email with the subject line, "Evidence of discrimination and harassment at Hamilton and Brooks had just landed in the inboxes of every board member, containing audio files, documentation, and a detailed timeline of events. James Carter's arrival at Hamilton and Brooks was not the thunderous entrance of Hollywood imagination. Instead, it was the deliberate approach of a predator who knows his prey is cornered. The executive floor hummed with the aftermath of the celebration meeting. The elevator doors opened, and conversations stuttered to a halt as James stepped into the space, scanning the room until his eyes found Vanessa at her desk, still in her stained white shirt. Richard emerged from his office, irritation evident in his stride. "Excuse me," he called, moving to intercept James. "This is a private office. You can't just walk in here unannounced." James turned to him slowly, his expression neutral, but his eyes razor-sharp. "I'm here for my wife," he said simply. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of shock spreading outward. Richard faltered mid-step, confusion replacing irritation. "Your wife." His eyes darted to Vanessa, whose expression revealed nothing. Recognition dawned slowly on Richard's face as connections were made. James Carter, Vanessa Williams Carter. The implications were staggering, and Richard's complexion paled visibly. "Mr. Carter, I had no idea. We would have prepared a proper welcome had we known." "I'm sure you would have," James interrupted, his tone conversational but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "Just as unsure you would have treated my wife with the respect her qualifications deserve, had you known who she was married to." The rebuke was quiet but devastating. By now, everyone had stopped pretending to work, all attention focused on the unfolding scene. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in my office," Richard suggested, desperation creeping into his voice. "I don't think that will be necessary," James replied. The lawyer beside him stepped forward and handed a document to Richard. "This is a notice informing you that as of 11 days ago, Carter Tech Holdings, my company, acquired a 51% controlling interest in Hamilton and Brooks through a series of proxy purchases." The revelation hit like a thunderclap, gasps spreading across the office floor. Richard stared at the document, hands trembling slightly. "This is impossible. The board would have." "The board was notified this morning," James interrupted smoothly. "In fact, they're gathering in your conference room right now, reviewing some particularly troubling evidence that was anonymously submitted to them earlier today." As if on cue, Rebecca, Richard's executive assistant, emerged from the direction of the conference room, her expression resolute. "Mr. Hamilton," she said, her voice steady despite the tension, "the board members are asking for you, Miss Parker, and Miss Thompson to join them immediately. They've been reviewing the recordings." Richard's face went from pale to ashen. "Recordings?" Rebecca nodded, a hint of long-suppressed satisfaction in her eyes. "Yes, sir. Audio recordings of numerous incidents of discrimination, harassment, and defamation involving Ms. Williams and others, along with documentation of financial irregularities in several accounts." Melissa stepped forward, desperation making her reckless. "This is ridiculous. There are no recordings." Her words died as Vanessa finally spoke, her voice calm, but carrying throughout the now silent office. "Every conversation in this building for the past 5 months has been documented, Melissa. Every accidental exclusion from critical emails, every belittling comment, every instance of taking credit for others' work." She touched the button on her collar that'd been recording everything. "It's amazing what technology can capture these days." 30 minutes later, every employee of Hamilton and Brooks gathered in the main conference room. The board members sat in grim silence, their expressions suggesting they had witnessed something deeply disturbing. Richard, Melissa, and Sarah had been seated apart from them, isolated in chairs facing the gathering. James stood at the podium, commanding the room without speaking a word. Vanessa sat in the front row, her stained shirt a visual reminder of why they were all there. When James finally spoke, his voice was measured and deliberate. "For those who don't know me, my name is James Carter. As of 11 days ago, I became the majority shareholder of Hamilton and Brooks through my company, Carter Tech Holdings. He paused, allowing the information to sink in. This morning, the board received extensive documentation regarding concerning practices within this firm. These include systematic discrimination against employees based on gender and race, financial irregularities in client accounts, and a toxic corporate culture that rewards unethical behavior while punishing merit and integrity. Murmurs spread through the crowd. James raised a hand, quieting the room. Rather than tell you about these issues, I believe it's more effective to show you. What followed was 20 minutes of carefully curated snippets of recorded conversations, each more damning than the last. Richard's voice dismissing Vanessa's qualifications when he thought no one was listening. Melissa and Sarah plotting to sabotage the Johnson presentation by hiding Vanessa's materials. The bathroom conversation after the Coca-Cola incident, revealing the deliberate nature of the humiliation. When the last recording ended, Richard explicitly instructing Melissa to find a way to push her out before the Johnson meeting. James let the silence hang in the air, allowing the weight of evidence to settle. The board has spent the last hour reviewing this evidence and discussing appropriate responses, he continued. They have unanimously voted to remove Richard Hamilton as CEO, effective immediately. Additionally, Melissa Parker and Sarah Thompson have been suspended pending further investigation into their roles in these incidents. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Richard turned to the board members, betrayal and disbelief warring on his face, but found only resolved expressions looking back at him. James addressed the assembled employees. Real change requires more than removing problematic individuals. It requires examining and reforming the systems that enabled their behavior in the first place. To that end, the board has unanimously approved the creation of an oversight committee focused on workplace culture, ethical practices, and genuine inclusion. He looked toward Vanessa, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly and rose, making her way to the podium. Standing before the company that had tried to break her spirit, in a shirt still stained with the visible evidence of their contempt, Vanessa took a deep breath. 8 months ago, she began, her voice clear and steady. I came to Hamilton and Brooks because I believed in its potential, not just as an investment firm, but as an institution that could lead by example in an industry that has historically struggled with inclusion. She looked around the room, making eye contact with colleagues who had been silent witnesses to her mistreatment. What happened here isn't unique to this company. It's a reflection of broader patterns that exist throughout our industry and our society, patterns that can only change when we collectively decide they must. Vanessa outlined a vision not of punishment, but of reformation, a comprehensive plan for restructuring the company around principles of merit, transparency, and genuine inclusion. But it was her final proposal that surprised everyone. As for Ms. Parker and Ms. Thompson, Vanessa said, turning to look directly at the women who had orchestrated her humiliation, I am proposing something different than termination. I propose they be the first participants in our new professional development program. A 6-month intensive course on ethical leadership, unconscious bias, and corporate accountability. At the end of that period, their continued employment will depend on demonstrable change, as evaluated by the Ethics Committee and their peers. She paused, allowing the radical nature of the suggestion to sink in. This isn't about punishment. It's about growth and accountability. As Vanessa concluded her remarks, an employee in the back of the room began to applaud. The sound was joined by another, then several more, until the entire conference room resonated with approval, not just for her specific proposals, but for the vision of a workplace where excellence could thrive regardless of gender, race, or background. 6 months later, the Hamilton and Brooks offices bore little resemblance to the environment where Vanessa had once fought for basic respect. The morning light streamed through the windows as Vanessa walked through the main floor, greeting employees by name, receiving genuinely warm responses in return. She wore a white button-up shirt, as always, but now it was a conscious choice rather than armor. A symbol of continuity and resilience that everyone in the company understood. The quarterly all-hands meeting was filled beyond capacity with employees standing along the walls and even watching from the hallway through the glass partitions. David Wells, now the permanent CEO, after the board conducted a thorough executive search, called the meeting to order, beginning with a review of the company's quarterly results. The numbers were impressive: client retention strong, new business growing, employee satisfaction scores at an all-time high. The financial turnaround had been remarkable, proving that ethical leadership and profitability were not mutually exclusive. Today, David announced, "I'm pleased to announce that the board has unanimously approved our selection for the permanent head of our expanded diversity and ethics division. This critical role will be filled by," he paused, building anticipation, "Melissa Parker." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by scattered applause that gradually grew stronger. Melissa, looking both shocked and moved, slowly rose from her seat. Vanessa stepped forward, extending her hand in a public gesture of professional respect. Those who had witnessed the Coca-Cola incident 6 months earlier couldn't help but note the symmetry of the moment. Then Melissa had publicly humiliated Vanessa. Now, Vanessa was publicly recognizing her growth and potential. It wasn't friendship. Too much had happened for that. But it was something perhaps more valuable in a professional context. Mutual respect, earned through difficult, honest engagement with past failures. As the meeting concluded and employees began to file out, Richard Hamilton approached Vanessa near the podium, their first encounter since his removal. "Impressive turnaround," he said, his tone carefully modulated to reveal nothing of his true feelings. "The company seems to be thriving under the new direction." Vanessa assessed him calmly, noting the subtle changes in his demeanor: less arrogance, more caution. "It's thriving because talented people are finally able to contribute fully," she replied, neither hostile nor particularly warm. Richard nodded, absorbing this. "I'd underestimated you," he admitted finally. Thoroughly and repeatedly. Vanessa allowed herself a small smile. "You underestimated a lot of people, Richard. That was always your fundamental mistake." Later that afternoon, as the celebration wound down, Vanessa found herself alone for a moment near the window overlooking the city. A new sign had been installed in the reception area, visible from where she stood: "Diversity is strength. Your voice matters." Simple words, but backed now by concrete policies, demonstrated commitment, and shared experiences. She thought about the journey from the humiliation of the Coca-Cola incident to the creation of something genuinely transformative. The stain had long since been washed away from her shirt, but its impact remained, transmuted into something constructive and powerful. James joined her by the window, following her gaze to the sign. "Proud of you," he said simply, no further elaboration needed between them. From across the room, Melissa caught Vanessa's eye and gave a small, respectful nod. Not friendship, not yet, and perhaps not ever, but acknowledgement of a shared commitment to something larger than either of them. The transformation wasn't complete. It never would be, not really. That was the point. Growth continued. Accountability remained essential. Progress required ongoing vigilance. But the foundation had been laid, strong enough to build upon, resilient enough to withstand challenges yet to come. "Ready to go home?" James asked softly. Vanessa looked around once more at what they had created. Not perfect, but purposeful. Not finished, but fundamentally changed. The company that had once tried to break her spirit had instead been reshaped by it. "Yes," she said finally, gathering her things. "Tomorrow's going to be a busy day." Outside, the setting sun painted the city in hues of possibility. A fitting backdrop for a story still being written. A transformation still unfolding. A future still revealing itself one day, one decision, one voice at a time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. where we celebrate quiet strength, real struggles, and unexpected victories. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.